Did you miss us? We missed you. Welcome to Braves Talk, everybody. As always, it's me, Matt Freites, and across from me, we have three gentlemen today, and we'll get to that last one in a minute. But first, the coach, Brad Powell, and of course, the OG, Rick Powell. Rick, I think we missed you the most, buddy. How you doing, fellas?
Oh, everybody misses me.
Iceman, doing well. Dad, glad to be here with you as always. Aaron, happy you're here to join us. We are officially in Bradley Braves postseason mode, right? We have kind of the season to reflect on, talk about, kind of the road ahead here. And obviously we're in the middle of March Madness. There's plenty of national topics we can talk about as well. But, Aaron, just kind of want to bring you in. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. And kind of like what we always do is we ask, the people that join us, kind of give us your background as far as it relates to being a Bradley basketball fan and how that all came to be.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here. So as you mentioned, I'm Aaron. I've been a Bradley basketball fan here for, I guess, about 16, 17 years here. I actually was not a huge Bradley basketball fan growing up as a kid. I went to a few games with my dad. My dad was a Bradley alum, grew up in the Peoria area. I went to, one or two games a year. I enjoyed watching it. But what really got me into it, I went to high school with Darius Sims-Edwards. We were friendly. I wouldn't say we were like really good friends, but we got along really well. And when I went to Bradley, I wanted to go support him. And I started going to the games, and I ended up falling in love with Bradley basketball.
Awesome. So a Washington guy then.
Yep, I went to Washington for all 4 years, and just the last 2 years before you get there.
I got my first technical foul as a fan at Washington.
That's why we have him on the show. Yeah, that's why we have him on the show. But fellas, you do realize that he's probably one of the most professional and polished people that we're going to have on here. He's going to make us look bad.
I think it's great.
I do too. I mean, we did have Matt McClain, so like he actually calls games, but let's take him out of this. Let's get back to the rest of us. But Aaron, it is nice to have you here, and we are happy that you came on here to be a part of this tomfoolery or whatever you want to call it. But it's been over a month, and I would say a lot has happened in that month, but I feel like the story is exactly the same every time we come on here. The Braves have been up, they've been down, and now they're just done because the season is over. So, Brad, why don't you kind of maybe recap what has happened, but really we're in off-season mode, and we'll get to that. But what's happened since the last time we have been on here?
Yeah, so obviously, the Braves bowed out in the semifinals at Arch Madness. It was, we saw the team we'd seen all year where we go on great runs. I think what's interesting is we see within a game what we see from the team over the stretch of the season, where these like super high highs, super low lows, and just the yo-yo roller coaster, whatever analogy you want to use. And it's really tough to win against good teams when you play that way, unfortunately. But, the Braves ran into a Northern Iowa team in the semis that was playing their best basketball of the year. First team in Valley history to win 4 games in 4 days and win Arch Madness. And so you have to give them a lot of credit. Also, I think you got to give Valpo credit. They played, a great game against Bradley on Friday. And it's an exciting basketball game to watch, tough to watch as a fan because you're on pins and needles the whole time. 2 overtimes, right? Is that what it was? So and they're bringing some guys back. So it's going to be interesting to see how things are going in the next season. But, Northern Iowa wins, goes to the dance, gets knocked out in the first round by a really good St. John's team. The Braves make the NIT and host, what I think you could consider a mid-major sort of powerhouse in a lot of ways is Dayton. Dayton's a really good program there at the upper echelon of the mid-majors. And, fortunate for us, they had to come to Peoria because they couldn't host. But the Braves weren't up to the task. And it was really obvious too, to see the disparity, like physically, I think, in that game. And that's not a knock on our program at all. It's just, athletically, length, physicality, there was just a very obvious difference. And I think, and we see this in March Madness, but the great equalizer is always shooting, right? And we didn't shoot the ball very well. And it's tough to beat a team like that, when you can't get hot from beyond the arc. And so that being said, plenty to like about the season. I think, it's been said here before, one of Coach Wardle's best coaching jobs that we've seen. And it'll be interesting to see where we're at going forward. Aaron, if you want to chime in, add anything to that, and I'm sure the OG has some thoughts as well.
So I thought Arch Madness this year, just like you said, you got to give a lot of credit to UNI for winning 4 games in 4 days. Incredibly impressive. First team ever to do that. only the second team ever to make it from Thursday to the championship game. Valpo did that the year we beat them in 2020. But it was just an incredibly impressive run from Northern Iowa, and they shot the lights out. And my dad and I have been going down to Arch Madness and getting all session tickets for about a decade now. This was probably the most entertaining Arch Madness, especially on Thursday, that we've been to in all those years. I mean, Valpo played great, Northern Iowa played great. There were so many good games in that entire tournament, and Arch Madness just in general was great. Northern Iowa, the way that they shot the ball was just so impressive. I mean, 70% in the first half against us, 70% in the first half again against UIC on Sunday. I mean, you can't do anything to stop somebody when they're shooting that well. You just got to tip your hat to them and try to, get them off their spots so they're not getting those shots. But like you said, it was great to get another home game for the NIT, to get that game against Dayton. It was just not meant to be for Bradley that day, but I love being back in Carver for one last game.
No, absolutely. You never take for granted being there at those games. And I've kind of learned that as I've gotten older and talked about it here, how, I thought we'd never see a sellout again, at Carver after, the Gino Ford era and everything else. And then we got that a few years ago against Drake. We got that this year against Illinois State, or at least on paper. And so it was, it's just really great to see Bradley basketball in the state that it's in, honestly, especially hanging in there the way they are in the modern climate of college sports with NIL and the transfer portal. Dad, any thoughts on the Braves and kind of the season as a whole?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the good teams pretty much handled this. I mean, this is the way it was all season. The weaker teams, I mean, some of them we actually even struggled against, and a couple we actually lost to. That was probably in part due to our overall youth, other than Meta and AJ, Alex, and Corey Thomas. But still, when you got a sophomore point guard and a freshman guard is coming in and filling his way into D1 ball, there are some bright things to look at. I know, right now we, outside of the seniors, we did lose 2 so far, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But overall, when the win-loss side, yeah, I think Wardle did his absolute best with what we had coming in. Some guys just had struggled buying into the defensive, the rebounding, competing side. That has always kind of been a staple. But with as much turnover, especially on the coaching staff, I think that kind of hurt, I think, overall, as much as, a couple of the players, coming, the new guys coming in, Alex and AJ. So, but, we'll see. A lot of Bradley basketball in my lifetime yet to go see. So it's all going to be exciting.
Yeah. And you're right. And, we talked a lot about all the changes, and it's very, again, we'll get into it, but like it's in the modern world of college sports, it's like you're dating every player. You're not marrying any of them, right? I mean, they're here, they're gone. And, maybe for a year, maybe 2 years, especially at the mid-major level. And we joked in the chat about, it's like being the Rays or the A's or the Brewer. I mean, you're essentially the farm system for the Power Five. And it's got to be a tough spot to be in. And I mean, I'll give the staff credit. They've adapted as much as they can anyways. And I'm sure this is something that, in a behind closed doors, Coach Wardle has to absolutely hate this, because I think he thrives in building those relationships and developing players. And unfortunately, this system doesn't lend itself to that very much.
On the relationship side, that's not going to change much. And even the culture can't change, even as much turnover as we may end up having, even in the future. It's the adaptation of new guys coming in, from the players adapting to our coaching staff, our style, to the coaches adapting to the players, and then the players amongst themselves. He does his program, kind of as, a team building in the off season, when players come in. He's got all these other activities. I know some people have made fun of the playing volleyball instead of being on the court shooting, stuff like that. Them other things, other activities, is huge in building that camaraderie within a team. And I'm sure even in the off season and stuff players got plenty of time on the court.
Well, and Wardle is a developmental coach. We've talked about that. Players get better year over year, but players get better in the season too. Just look at AJ from where he started this season and what he was at the beginning of the year to where he finished the year. He was playing some of the best basketball of his entire career in that last month or so. Same thing with Alex. He came in really as a 3-point specialist. I felt like he was our second best player behind Bully all year, and he got better even from just being that catch and shoot guy to a guy that you can run your offense through. I think that the nice thing about Wardle is that he does do that development in the offseason, like you mentioned, but he still does a great job of developing players over the course of the season.
I actually saw that. Sorry, Rick. I saw that assessment about Rick Pitino with St. John's, right? And how at the beginning of the year, they looked a little bit sluggish after the year that they had, but Pitino really rides the kids hard, especially at the beginning of the year. And then when you get later in the year, and we've said this about Wardle too, how Wardle teams generally tend to play better later in the season, especially late February and into March. And I think that there is something to that about evaluating in the offseason, but also getting the most that you can out of a team in the actual season. And we have been very complimentary of Brian Wardle this year, because I think if you look at this team and you put a first-time head coach over this right now, I don't think you're going to get the results that you got. So as inconsistent as it was, I think that there were actually a lot of positives to take away and things that you can build on. But one other thing, and I want to give Kev here, Rick, he's agreeing with you. This is a new thing. And turnover, it's not just players, it's coaches too. And coaches have always moved, but I think the NIL era now has made it so that the stakes are higher for almost every program, and guys are going to jump even quicker, and assistants are going to get moving. And building continuity just as a program is going to be more and more difficult as the guardrails continue to be non-existent in college basketball.
Right. Yeah. And, in what Kevin said in his next statement of getting better, at player evaluations. And I've got to feel that with what Coach had to deal with this year, he's a learning individual with all this, as well as the fans and everybody else. He's getting into this still, and he's always going to be learning to get better. So I think his evaluation of the type of player to bring in, he's got a vision, and he needs to stay with that vision. Even though you may bring a kid in and he's going to leave next year, you got to bring that kid in that you really feel is going to mesh with other players that you have, those that may stay. Hopefully the rest of them do. That's yet to be determined. But with what players do stay, you want to bring in players that's going to mesh very well with your system, your culture. I think, what was it? One of the, I think the recruits, one of the reasons he's wanting to come here is the winning culture, with the team. And, we've got 4 consecutive 20-win seasons, and we've since 18, 19, we've been to, eligible for 2 NCAA tournaments and 4 straight NITs. So, it's that part of the culture is there. We just need to keep bringing in guys that fit Wardle's vision and that he can work with. And then it's not just what he can do in evaluating and developing in 1 year. It's what that kid that comes in can give to the program and give to the team. It's just as much on the players as it is the coaches.
Yeah, and also too, I was going to mention this the other night in the chat when we were talking about player development. One time I caught Braves Plus before one of the games this season when they had, and I think that Chad did it a couple times, where he had the strength staff on. Maybe it was before 2 games in a row or something like that. He split it in half. And they were talking about their biggest challenges. They used to have, 3-4 years to get a kid ready, develop the kid over time, where now it's that timeline has shrunk, and it's you got to get these guys ready to play now, because you can't, you've got to get the most out of them while you can, because you don't know how long they're going to be around. And that's just, that's the catch-22 here, is you want to move these guys along and get them good as quickly as possible. But the second they become good, they're likely on their way out the door, possibly. And so it's just such a weird dynamic, this world that we're living in. But again, what a privilege it is to be in the position we're in. Right now, the state of Bradley basketball is in a really good place, and hopefully, I have no reason to believe we're not going to be able to, at minimum, sustain it. But hopefully, we can continue to grow as we move forward.
Well, and just jumping on that assistant coach thing, we lucked out for a long time by getting to keep the same assistant coaches year after year after year after year. I mean, some of those guys had opportunities to leave, but they chose to stick around with Brian Wardle because they believe what he did. And yeah, this year we had new assistant coaches, and that's going to take an adjustment to get used to how the different coaches work. And like Kevin even said, they're working with guys that they didn't recruit. They weren't the guys who brought these players in. And maybe their system doesn't mesh with what they planned on with the guys who brought them in. They were like, okay, we have this system in for what we want to do with Dietrich as a freshman, for example. And then a new coach comes in and maybe they don't run that same type of system, and Dietrich doesn't get as much playing time for that reason, or one reason or another. That was just, the name that came to my top of my head was Dietrich there. But we got so lucky by having those same assistant coaches year after year after year after year. And I think it speaks volumes to, again, the coaching staff. We've talked about it here, that we can bring in not just an entirely new roster and only have a few returning players, but an entire new coaching staff and still finish second in the Valley.
Yeah, exactly. And then, it helped Wardle learn and grow as a coach, as a head coach, especially for here. And I know there's been a lot of people talk about Wardle going here, going there, all the different openings that come up. I'm sorry. I'm gonna stick to my guns on this one. Wardle's going to be here probably for a long time because I have not yet in all my years as a Bradley fan had a coach leave on his own accord or get plucked away by anybody. Every single coach, and there was I think I counted seven different head coaches since the middle of the 70s that have all gotten fired. They have never left. The only caveat would maybe be Stan Albeck. Well, he resigned, but he resigned under pressure.
Well, he was also brought in to be a bridge,
Yes.
He was brought in to keep the team together when Versace was let go, to keep Hawkins and that group together, and then, be the bridge to the next guy, which he was. Unfortunately, at the end of his tenure, the program really fell off because I don't know that he was super interested in recruiting. And things like that. But, we got a young, energetic Coach Mo in, and, and we know the rest is history. And yeah, that's a good point. And you know what? And again, I mean, you guys hear me talk about it. I'm not a shill for the search season thing. I just find it really fascinating. But he said that he's brought Wardle up on multiple occasions over the last few years. And he always says that he's a guy that wins 20 games. He, granted, he's won the tournament twice, but it's just that he doesn't have that feather in his cap of getting into the tournament and winning a game or two. That would literally be the difference, I think, in his national profile as a coach to get plucked away by some of these places. But the fact that his name is even brought up at times, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the program that his name's brought up. You never heard Gino Ford's name brought up, right, for any other jobs when he was here. And I like Gino as a person. I mean, he was very charismatic. He was fun to listen to, but he just wasn't a very good basketball coach, at least here at Bradley. So, it's it's a good thing that his name's going to bounce around. And I agree. Who knows? I mean, the guy's a competitive guy. He wants to win. I think he's loyal too, which you don't always see these days. And I really respect and appreciate that. But, some program comes along, and me and my dad talked about this. I don't think he leaves to go rebuild another program. I think that if it became something to a similar situation to when McCollum went to Drake, where you had an established program, you weren't rebuilding it from the ground up. It's not like they finished last. They were coming off a league title, and I think if there was a program like that where the head coach moved on, instead of getting fired, the head coach moved on to a better job, and he could move into a program that's already winning, that's already established. I think he would hold out for a situation like that, as opposed to going, to the American or somewhere and taking over a bottom feeder.
We also don't know how history would have played out if the 2020 tournament had happened.
I was thinking that
Correct.
actually as they were talking.
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
That team with Daryl Brown, Nate Cannell, Koch Bar, it was he had a very good chance of winning games in the tournament that year. I mean, they were as good as any mid-major that year. And we might not have Wardle right now if that 2020 tournament happens.
I've said that before. I agree completely. I think that again, one of those things. And I'm speculating, but I would bet you that him and they were probably almost banking on that, right? Like, hey, this is our ticket. We built this program. We're gonna go to the tournament. We're gonna win a game or two, and we're on the bigger and better things. And then what sucks is that next season was, obviously you had the COVID year, which made everything weird. Then we had obviously the issues that happened in Springfield, Missouri, and so on and so forth. And that was just it was a rough season. It's like, and he had to be like, damn it, like we gotta build this thing back up again. It wasn't rock bottom by any means, but it was a step back for sure.
Brad, I think too, one thing that's interesting to look back in hindsight is the COVID season and all the weirdness with that, not allowing Brian Worrell to potentially win a game or two in the tournament and potentially go somewhere else has kind of allowed him to stay at Bradley, be successful, but also watch the landscape change. And I think evaluate for himself what is happening and where he would fit in. And it's very possible that he's looking at this and thinking, man, I could make a lot of money elsewhere, but potentially the way that I want to coach, the way that I want my players to be, the higher the stakes, the higher the money, I feel like that becomes more and more difficult in this particular day and age. So he's probably in an advantageous place where he can be selective and say, I'm good here. Like, yeah, we may have to somewhat rebuild this program here, but I like it here. I like the people I work for, the people that are supporting, the fan base, all that kind of stuff. And so maybe in some way it's a silver lining for the program and for him because he can evaluate this a lot differently than if he just took that jump and then the landscape changes as he's at his new school. You know what I mean?
And I think it does speak volumes to how much they like Peoria, that Maya Wardle came back to play for Bradley, that they like the school, that it's not just Brian who the family likes Peoria. They like the school. They like the area. I mean, that speaks volumes to me that he does want to be here, at least that the family likes to be here.
And that was another reason why I've always felt that, outside of the money and stuff, his family's is pretty much established here and they like it here. And I think as long as that's the case and Emmy's going to be coming up and, his son, I don't know where he sits. I haven't heard a whole lot on what he does athletically or anything, but getting on back with different jobs with Coach Wardle, there's one place that I think he could be somewhat successful. And it's very somewhat similar to Bradley as far as academics, the requirements of getting in, and that is Notre Dame.
I mean, I think when they hired Shrewsbury, I think his Wardle's name, I think, was floated around a little bit when that happened. I don't know in a serious way, probably on one of those lists where there's a dozen coaches that, get listed and things like that. But which, I mean, I don't know. They haven't fired.
They haven't
Shrewsbury,
fired.
but they might.
I know he's on the cusp of being, sent out the door.
I mean, they better make it happen. The off season moves fast.
Well, I know. And I think fit wise, of all the different places, that one would have the closest fit, and he'd have the access to a higher level of players coming in. I mean, athletically, the talent level would be up. That's one places that I think a lot of other places I don't know if he'd fit very well.
I said this to my dad the other day. I said, you know what? And I think a lot of us make the unfair assumption that everyone that's elite at basketball as a player is a dirtbag or something. You know what I mean? And that's absolutely not the case, but, or a diva maybe would be a better way to phrase it. And, because I think that's what we're all referring to when we say Wardle's got to find the right fit. Because I don't think that he would do well with me first guys, that want to get theirs, that diva mentality. But not every great player is that way. And, probably the majority of them aren't that way. But there's a lot that could happen there. Who knows? There's still a lot of dominoes that could fall in the coaching carousel, which we can talk about later. but I think now's a good time to kind of talk about the roster a little bit, right? Obviously, we know that Montana Wheeler and Caillou now have entered the transfer portal. We anticipate, probably, I think we all anticipate we're going to hear something on Damarian Birch, most likely. I mean, of course, we don't know until we know, but that's one that's kind of been on all of our radars for a while. And then who knows from there? I think we're all hoping we can retain, Jaquan Johnson, but, I think that there's some, Bradley's going to have to find a way to make the money work, not just for Jaquan, but for the program. And so there's a lot there too. And, Aaron, I'm kind of curious on how you feel about the roster. I know that you're the eternal optimist, which I love, and hoping that they all stay. And I love that mentality. It's just become so hard these days with the way things are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Jaquan, I would love to see him back. I mean, I think we all would love to see him back. We're all prepared for the possibility of him leaving, but I think I'm more optimistic than most that he might stick around. He's at the level where he can have a lot of success. I'm not saying that he can't be a successful player at like the Big Ten or SEC or anything like that, but he wouldn't be what he is here at that level. He would be a piece on a team. He wouldn't be the guy. And I think that he is such a great player for Bradley and took such a huge step from where he was as a freshman to where he was as a sophomore. And I think he values what Wardle does as a coach. And the last quote we got from Jaquan was that Wardle's a great coach, that he likes it at Bradley, and he's definitely thinking about staying. Now, does that mean he's going to come back? Who knows? We don't know that for sure until he says that. But as I've said all along, until I see Jaquan Johnson's name in the transfer portal, I'm going to be optimistic about our chances of retaining him. And as far as the rest of the roster is concerned, I really like the guys we've already signed so far. I really think Noah Williams is going to be a great player. Here at Bradley, from what I've seen, he is the exact type of player that we really could have used this year. That 6'8" kind of forward that's athletic and really could do a lot for you. Ben Thornbrew looks to be a really good player as well.
Yeah.
I like that. And then Race, and I cannot pronounce his last name. I'm not even going to try right now.
Kowalczyk? Is that Kowalczyk? Is that
something like that? I would butcher it if I tried, but I will get that name once he's here. I'll get it. But Race looks to be a really good freshman, and obviously we don't know what the other recruits that we're looking at are, but I like that we have at least one freshman on the team. I know that in this day and age, developing a player, getting freshmen in isn't necessarily as important as it was years ago. But it is fun to have those young players in the team that maybe they do stick around and maybe you do get to develop them and see them long term. So I like the players that we have signed. I would have loved if Montana would have decided to stick around here, but ultimately he has to do what's best for him. And if he wants to move to a different school, it is what it is there. Kai was the one that actually surprised me more than Montana, though. I really did not anticipate him going into the transfer portal. But at the same time, I don't know that he was ever going to be a 28, 30-minute a game player. He always seemed to me like he was going to be more of a backup big, at least at this level. He can give us some good minutes, and I liked a lot of what I saw from him. He had a great shooting stroke for a big man, and I thought he made a lot of nice athletic plays around the rim. But he, I think Wardle saw what we all saw all year, which is we are not the same level inside that we have been for the last decade when we had players like Elijah Childs, like Kochball, like Darius Hannah. We need to elevate our inside game. And while I think Caillou could be a nice, backup big in this this level, I'm not as devastated that he's leaving because I feel like there are better options that we can get at this level.
Yeah, and that might not have been Kai's choice, right? It's possible that was, hey, we're not going to have a spot for you, type of scenario. And that's just, again, and that's the one thing too, is, we forget, and this is a two-way street. It's not just exclusively up to the player. These scholarships and the NIL, as far as we know, these are 1-year deals. And, every year you have to re-recruit your entire team, the ones you want to stay, but you also have the ability to send the ones you don't want down the road. And, so that's an interesting dynamic, but I'm sure that the coaches to some degree are at least pleased that, they have that option. if you will. But and in regards to Johnson, I have a kind of a rough idea, sort of where the Bradley NIL budget might be. I'm not going to throw any numbers out, but like, my fear would be is what it would take to keep Jaquan and Peoria, even at a discount, would eat up a large portion of what Bradley's available NIL funding is, to the best of my understanding. And that creates some challenges, and so that's what I think will be the biggest thing. He may want to stay, but when you're talking about, I mean, he may have, it may be a situation where someone's able to offer him 3 to 4 times what Bradley's able to offer him. And at some point, as much as you might like Coach Wardle, as much as you might like Peoria, as much as you might like playing 35 minutes a night, when you're talking about potentially life-changing money, I think that's a hard thing to get a 20-year-old to walk away from. And obviously they have, and I have no idea. I'm not trying to imply anything about Jaquan's family, but like, who knows what kind of people he has in his ear that are advising him to do certain things for different reasons. I'm sure that there's all sorts of people that get involved in these kind of things and try to give these kids advice and guidance. And so it'll be really fascinating to see kind of what happens with this. I mean, I think that I don't know for certain, but I mean, it was kind of implied that like Duke took a discount to stay. He could have gotten more money elsewhere, for sure. And I agree with you, Aaron. Like, I don't know that he goes anywhere. He's not going to be the same type of guy he is at Bradley at a P5. It's just not the case, but he would be a valuable piece for a program like that, because you could put him in for 15 minutes a night, just sit him in there to be a pest, and just disrupt the other team. And, especially defensively, he has the ability to drive and draw fouls. Now, could he do that against, the likes of, the upper echelon of the Big Ten, the SEC? Who knows? But that's also, these guys all think very highly of. They're very confident, and they should be. And just like coaches, me and my dad talk all the time. Like, coaches, they see some of these deficiencies in players when they're recruiting them, but they have confidence in themselves to coach them up. Well, just like these players, they think they can play at that level. And if they get the opportunity, I think, they're going to bet on themselves and take it more often than not. It just, it would take a, I think it'd be a very mature decision on his part to stay here in Peoria and be the guy and, hopefully lead this program to a championship. But I can't say that would necessarily be the best decision for him, like long-term. Who knows?
I'm going to bring a different perspective to it. One, we all love Bully. We all love any player that comes in and puts on a Bradley uniform. That's just how we do it. But there's 365 Division I schools. I don't know what the number is on D2, D3, the junior college level. We're bringing in 2 junior college players right now, and I bet we'll have at least one more, maybe 2. Thornbrew, by the way, I think might be our defensive player. That shutdown guy. And they can go after boards. Will he be as good as Mao? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe better than Mao. Nobody knows. We can speculate all we want, but until he hits the floor and proves, can he be Thornbrew and be a defensive stopper, next year, that's what we want, right? Okay, but of the 365 schools at D1 level, probably most, if not all of them, will have transferring out for various reasons. Not all of them is going to get bags, especially the higher levels that's sitting at the back end of a bench. Basically, they're going to flop with let's say a Bully goes in. Somebody else is sitting on a bench. Bully's going to take that guy's spot. That guy's going to go to a mid-major maybe, or maybe even lower, or as some players never even make it to another school. So even if we lose Bully, and I hope we don't, I really do, but even if we lose Bully, we're going to get a good player in. Wardle has been fairly decent bringing in good players, for the most part. I mean, there's been a few eggs laid, but still, on the positive side is there's going to be players to get.
And we got a couple good guards on the roster.
Right now. Yeah, we do have some good guards, and we got some good ones coming in, and someone that he's out there shaking the bushes for right now. And that's guard, the small guard position is something that Wardle's been pretty decent at finding and bringing in. So, yeah, it's hard, especially an old guy like me. I'm used to seeing guys come in as freshmen, develop, and stay here for 4 years. That's it's hard because you get attached. As fans, I'm going to have to try and learn. I'm not going to get attached. I'm going to still love this kid for coming in and enjoy his play, but I'm not going to get attached to him and expect to see him here all 4 years. That's just how I'm going to have to adjust.
And that's what's funny is like our kids, my kids, they don't get the luxury, that like I had as a kid where like you get to really like, you just became super fans of these players, because they were around for 4 years. And, I remember like, we were taking my daughter to games and, she got a Connor Hickman, we got her one of the Connor Hickman jerseys, the jersey shirt with his name on the back. And then like the next season he was gone, gone to Cincinnati. And it's like, but that's just the world we live in these days. What's that, Dan?
Kevin just brought up that we're in on a teammate of Thornbrew, from Middle Tennessee State. And I did see that before the show started tonight.
Yeah. I will say that one thing that gives me a sliver of hope when it comes to Jaquan is, and again, I know some people push back on it in the chat and maybe nothing, but Snell had made the comment about didn't know how long the young guy wanted to sit behind the older guy in reference to Montana and Jaquan. Without again disclosing any specifics, like I do know that Bradley made a very strong offer to Montana that's in the ballpark of what he was offered elsewhere. And he still chose to move on. And so, that being said, I wonder if he was, thought there was a good chance that Jaquan was going to stay. Or maybe he just didn't like his experience for whatever reason. Or again, you get these handlers and parents involved. I mean, his brother has bounced around in college. Montana himself went to like 3 different high schools, so like bouncing around's not, I guess, outside of their, standard operating procedure within their family. But I agree. It would have been great if he would have stayed, but maybe, I'm not trying to say it means anything, but it could. And that's what gives me a little sliver of hope about Quan maybe sticking around.
Well, and regardless of if Quan sticks around or if he doesn't or anything like that, Wardle's been here, what, is it 12 years now? Something like that. I can't remember exactly how many years it is. But outside of his first 2 years, and that COVID year where we had the debacle in Springfield, he's finished top 5 every year since he's been here. He gets the most out of his teams. And regardless of who's on the roster next year, I'm going to be optimistic that we can do that again. Whether it's Jaquan, whether it's, whether Dietrich Richardson is coming into a big role, whether Matthew Zobrist is now stepping into a bigger role, whether Timo's our guy that we're kind of going to be relying a lot on. Wardle gets the most out of his teams, and he always has. And I fully expect that will continue because for basically his entire time here, he's been able to keep us in the top half of the Valley outside of those first 2 years where he was building a program. And of course, that 1 year where we had all sorts of issues.
Brad, if you don't mind, before we kind of shift, then that's a good segue, Aaron, to talking about the Valley and then kind of getting to some more national topics. But I want to circle back to something you said, Brad. You talked about Bully and the advice that he was getting. And one thing that sticks out to me in this landscape of NIL, and it's football, it's basketball, it's any sport, is I think there's a market underneath the money part. I think the money is what everybody assumes, and that's the outward facing part of it, right? That's what it seems like everybody wants. But there's sort of a level of this of agents and advice with these kids where you'll talk about going from college to pro. There are guardrails as to who can be an agent and accreditations and so forth. And in the NCAA right now, anybody can be an advice giver. Anybody can say, oh, yeah, I'm going to be an agent for this kid. And you wonder what kind of advice that they're getting, because if you look at the number of kids who are hitting the transfer portal, it's growing. I mean, in football, by the time we got to the end of the portal window, how many kids were still not with a team? And you're taking a huge risk by, it's not betting on yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. But you kind of wonder where these young kids, and you talked about 20-year-old life-changing money, who is in their ear giving them the advice? Now, not every kid is that, but I'm sure there are a ton of them who are like, oh, yeah, you're going to be the best thing at the next level, and you should go. And they go, they take the bag, and then we never hear from them again. I mean, not every player that is transferred with coaches from the Valley to, say, an Iowa or an Indiana has really translated to a nationally spectacular player or game-changing player at that level. And so I think it's something that just never really gets talked about, but I do wonder so much about how that works for a lot of these players, especially at this level when there are a lot of places that they could jump. And I don't want to belabor all of this, obviously, but that was just something Kevin said, and it really popped into my mind because I think it is an important element that we don't have any insight into.
Yeah, there will be a 30 for 30 about this era of college sports someday. I have no doubt about that. And it'll be like the people that it didn't work out for. You'll get both sides. You'll get the extremes. You'll get the ones that really cashed in, the stories of them, and you'll hear the ones where they transferred with promises of so on and so forth and got some money and then fell off, like you said, never heard from them again. And that's what's so just so fascinating about all of this and how fast it moves, because to kind of shift things nationally a little bit, we had in the notes, coaching changes in the Valley. Well, as of right now, it's just Casey Alexander, right? Went to Kansas State, and it wouldn't seem at this point that anyone else is going to be moving on. But about 30 minutes before we fired up, the reports started coming out that Hubert Davis is leaving North Carolina. Now, no, that doesn't mean that anyone from the Valley is going to North Carolina, but there's going to be a domino effect from that.
Yes.
Someone's going to take that North Carolina job. Someone's going to take the job that person vacates, and so on and so forth. And so there's still some movement that could happen here. There's also a couple little, is Tom Izzo going to stick around? Is Bill Self going to stick around? I think I've heard that Self might have one of those, what's
he's got a lifetime
popular,
contract, I believe.
Well, no, but he may have, I don't know if it's like one of those official coaches in waiting, but there may be a guy that's considered the coach in waiting there.
Izzo, I have no idea what he's doing around.
Yeah, right. I heard a press conference about Izzo. Somebody said to him, they said, "Coach, one of the things I respect the most about you and your program is players have come and gone, but every time I watch Michigan State play, it's just like it's the same. It's the same style of play. It's the same physicality." And Izzo goes, "Man," he's like, "You just gave me the confidence. That's a great compliment. I'm going to coach 2 more years now just because of that, or something like that." But it's there's a lot of changes that could still happen. I mean, I think it's a popular opinion that if Ben Jacobson was going to leave UNI, he would have left by now. Because he's a name that would be thrown out there. Some of these, lower high major programs, and even some of these, A10 level, upper echelon mid major programs. But who knows if that'll happen? But I don't think it's all said and done as far as that goes. But I just do think it's fascinating how quickly all of this moves, and who knows what's in store for the future of Valley coaches. But the Valley's in as good of a place as it's been in a long time, though. When you talk about quality coaches, and we have some programs that have managed to retain some of their talent. Valpo being one of them. But they got some really big financial commitments, which makes a big difference.
Check that out. A man after Rick's heart, Tom Izzo. I think that rings true.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a couple stones off on this one, but I'm getting a feeling that some of the older coaches who may be retiring what I think might be early, like the guy McDermott, he's still got gas in his tank, but he's retiring. I think some of these guys that are retiring are just not wanting to deal with the free for all and the transfer portal. And
Izzo kind of called those people out the other day.
Really?
He did, because he's still here.
I missed it.
Yeah, he said, we've had a lot of coaches. He goes, I respect the guys that have gotten out because of the changes, maybe have driven them out of the game. He goes, we're supposed to be stewards of the game, and I think, what he's implying there is, we are the people that could invoke the change we think needs to happen and to fix this and correct it. And instead of doing that, they've chosen to, I won't say like take their ball and go home, because these are guys that have put their time in and they have the right to retire and go live their lives. But, I think that he's kind of he's going to be the last one standing, kind of carrying the torch of, the old guard.
They're going to wheel him out of that chair dead in his office.
And he is one of those coaches that he still does it the old-fashioned way, even in this modern era. I mean, I saw a graphic online about where all the starting players for the different schools started their college career. Michigan State was the only one where all 5 players started their college career at Michigan State. He still develops those talent. He still retains talent. He doesn't use the transfer portal the same way that some of the other coaches do. And even in this era, he's still out there being Tom Izzo.
I saw somebody online say that, why are we giving Tom Izzo all this credit? He's only won one national championship and it was 25 years ago. And I get that sentiment to a degree, but also I don't get that sentiment to a degree, because the level of consistency as it's changed, and you could say that about Brian Wardle too, to bring it back to the Valley a little bit, where Wardle has been consistently good for the last however many years, right? And Brad, you said it, it's a privilege to have this program where it is. And Michigan State has been at that level for almost 30 years. Like, that's unheard of. And yeah, one national title, but there's a lot of programs that would kill to have that one national title. So I just feel like that's just garbage.
Well, and I mean, NIL has sort of, like, as much as it's created a chasm between the haves and have-nots, it's also in ways, now this is probably more related to the P5 schools, it's sort of the great equalizer, as we saw with Indiana football, right? And I think that, and that's what's funny is, like, on the other side of that, Indiana basketball, because you said, like, if Carolina doesn't get this hire right, they risk maybe falling into, not irrelevancy, but like, they could fall into a hole where they're going to have a hard time climbing back out of. And I think that, like, not that Indiana basketball has been elite for a while here, but they've been good. And I think that, like, DeVries, if DeVries struggles next year, that might be his last year there. They may move on. And so, and honestly, they're probably, I'd have to believe that there's some people in Bloomington, Indiana that are looking at the Iowa Hawkeyes right now and Ben McCollum and wondering if maybe they hired the wrong guy.
Man, Ben McCollum's stats as a coach are insane. Like, I saw his win-loss record everywhere he goes. He not only wins, he wins big. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
The guy is so I've listened to a couple interviews that the search season guy, he's done with some of these coaches. He's
another plug.
Dusty May and Josh Schertz and Ben McCollum, and I actually listened to the Ben McCollum one today, and the guy's not super, like, engaging, as I'm sure you could imagine, but, like, sharp guy, and you can tell he's just obsessed. And he talked about, and he didn't specify, I guess, what tournament it was, but he said that he was at a conference tournament, and it was, they were at the hotel or whatever, and he saw the coach. He was working in the lobby. He saw the coach of the team they were playing the next day leave at like 9:00 to go eat dinner with his family. And he goes, at that moment, I knew I had him. I knew we were going to beat him. He's because I was going to be up until 4:00 in the morning preparing. And, he's like, and he goes, I have nothing against it. I get it. Family's important. He's like, but nothing was going to, I was going to be as prepared as possible, and I think that, like, that's the difference though, between people like that and the rest of us.
Well, Mike, you were saying, just to bring it back just a little bit, you were talking about the NIL being the great equalizer for the power conferences. We see a school like Nebraska, which has never been a basketball school that had any success, winning their first ever NCAA tournament games this year. I mean, they get guys like Ring Math to come in there, and they get the coach's son in Hoiberg there, but they're now a program that's a force to be reckoned with. That's in the Sweet 16. I mean, you see schools, like any power conference school has to feel like right now they have the opportunity to get in there if they just, get the NIL right.
Yeah.
All of this is the Kurt Signetti effect. All of this goes back to, hey, if that guy can win at Indiana in football, anybody is on the chopping block. You need to be able to do this as long as you get the money.
Yeah.
It's all, I swear, like, I jokingly say that, but I think it's partially true that it will go back to even the pros are looking at their coaches and saying, hey, that guy can do that there, then you need to produce here.
Yeah. Well, and they're calling, like, now, like, on Twitter and stuff, they're calling Ben McCollum like the Kirk Signetti of college basketball. Like, that's how they're referring to him. He spent a lot of time at D2 and everything else, and, like, here he comes, and then he's like his first year at a P5, and he's got him in the Sweet 16, and honestly, with a really great chance to go to the Elite Eight. They played Nebraska, and I think from there it'd be the winner of Illinois and Houston, right?
Yeah, that bracket's wide open.
That would be a fun Sweet 16 Elite Eight round to be at in Houston, with Illinois, Houston, and Iowa and Nebraska. And I think, like I said in the chat the other night, I saw something that said, no matter how much Busch Light Houston thinks they have, they don't have enough.
Aaron, let me ask you a question. So this is the second Sweet 16 in a row where there are no mid-majors by how they're defining this. a lot of people are trying to extrapolate that this is sort of a trend, that we're going to see the mid-major sort of die off a little bit from big-time Cinderella runs and just kind of the NCAA tournament in general. Is there something to that in the way that this is going? And it doesn't seem like it's changing anytime soon.
Well, I mean, I think that there could be something to that, because with the NIL budgets, you are seeing a big gap between the athleticism in the power conference and the athleticism in the mid majors. But we were 20 minutes away from Siena beating Duke. We saw High Point beat Wisconsin.
That was a great game.
I mean, we are seeing mid majors that can still find ways to win. I mean, Siena had a 13-point lead early in the second half on Duke, on the best team, the number one overall seed, and it's a 16 seed that's pulling that out. There are always going to be good mid-major teams. And somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Brad, who talked about shooting is always going to be the great equalizer. And these mid-major teams, a lot of them can shoot the ball really well. And I don't think that we're going to see the end of Cinderella as we know it necessarily. I think that, we just are. I mean, you're going to see more and more games where there are power conference teams that are going to be blowing out some of the lesser teams, but you are still going to see some teams make a run. It's just for the last few years we haven't gotten those, but we can. I mean, High Point still won a game this year. It's not like they're not going to be any upsets at all. I don't think it's going to be all of a sudden, it's really, really chalky. I think it's just we've had a couple of years, and because it's the start of this new era, people are like, this is going to be the trend forever. There are some really good mid-major teams out there.
I agree.
And
some of them just aren't getting selected, though. Like that whole that's where I think I'm worried is before we even get to the tournament, we're seeing these resumes devalued. And then you see these mid-major coaches out there. That the High Point coach was on fire after they won that game about how they couldn't schedule anybody. And it seems that there has been this sort of camaraderie between these coaches to talk about the narrative of nobody wants to play us. And that is a problem. I don't know how they fix it, but it's a problem.
Yeah, and Miami of Ohio is a great example of that.
Yeah,
they had their undefeated season. They beat SMU in the play-in round. I mean, they shouldn't have had to play in the play-in round, but they did beat an ACC school in SMU there. So it's not like these guys can't beat anybody. And I do think that there is going to be, there's always going to be teams that probably deserve to be there. Like the one that always will stand out to me is that Indiana State team from a few years ago when Church was there. They should have been in the tournament.
I agree.
That absolutely should have been there. There's nothing more they could have done other than if they just would have beaten ISU the one time that that one game.
And not take us to overtime.
Exactly. But those teams there's the bubble. I mean, with the way the net is set up, I think the net needs to be looked at because it literally is. I think it was, I can't remember who was talking. It was somebody talking on Jason Whitlock's show. And it was, but anyway, they were talking about how you assign these teams a number at the start of the year.
Yeah.
And it's just that number is what they are. And
an early season loss. And you drop like Bradley did.
And there's no way for these teams that are in the 200, 300 range to move up to the 100 range or above 100. Yeah. They don't get the opportunities to move up.
We had a couple of teams that did a pretty good job of doing that. UIC and Valpo, they moved up pretty good from where they started.
Yeah, Matt, that's funny. You and I talked about Matt and I. We've done a football show in the past, and we talked about like how preseason rankings suck because like if you get ranked high, you essentially just have to like win your games and you'll stay there or even move up. But like if you get a poor ranking, it takes you potentially the entire season of winning a lot of games to move yourself to climb the ladder. And I think I want to talk about this scheduling stuff a little bit because it seems like it was asked a lot in post-game press conferences.
It's a narrative for sure.
And and you had a lot of, obviously the mid-major coaches were really pushing the nobody will play us narrative. Ben McCollum was asked about it and he just, he basically point blank said like, there's just no benefit. I mean, he was honest about it. He's like, there's no benefit for us to play a mid-major program. Like, but the metrics just don't favor it for us.
That sucks though. Like that's totally against what this whole thing is supposed to be. Whatever. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, Nate Oates, I think it was Nate Oates at Alabama. He really like pushed back against the narrative and said like, he goes, we'll play mid majors. And maybe he threw out a couple examples of teams they did play, but he did essentially say like, we're not going to go play them at their place though. He's like, and I think he referred to wherever he might have been at one point as a mid-major coach, and was like, I had no problem with getting bought and going and playing at this place or at that place, and I think I don't know, there might have been another coach that kind of sang the same song as far as like, when I was here, or no, was Nate Oates at Buffalo? Anybody know for sure? Somebody in the chat, maybe whoever it was, they were at Buffalo at one point in time, and he's like, we went and we beat Syracuse at Syracuse, and we went and we beat this team at the other. And he's like, that's just, if you're a mid major and you're mad that nobody will play you, go play them at their place, type of thing. And while it's like, I mean, who knows? In the where you want money now in the world of NIL, maybe that's what you got to do. Take the money and go play. And hell, even if you can just keep it close, it's going to help your metrics. I don't know. I mean, but the best you could hope for these days is, unless you have some sort of a relationship, like when Michigan came to Peoria, granted that was before the net, the coach at the time, I can't think of his name, of course, right now, but his son was like the director of basketball operations or whatever for Bradley at the time, which was why, was the only reason Michigan came to Peoria. But it's, go ahead.
That was Beeline, right?
Yeah, yep, that was it. Yep. And yeah, that's just what you got to do these days. Is, I mean, if you're lucky, you get them on a neutral site. But I mean, maybe the thing is like, you just got to go play these teams in their building and take your swing.
Sorry, this is pissing me off. This whole thing is, this is where I get so upset about how we are doing this now, because like, I was infuriated watching, and now I get it, Bruce Pearl's son is coaching Auburn, but a 17-16 team, and trying to say, oh, they should be in the tournament. Like, what are we doing? Oh, well, if they just won all their games. They didn't win their games. Like, win-loss is supposed to matter. And I'm getting to the point where I'm getting frustrated with good losses. They're losses. And when you play more games than in football, they play a very finite amount of games. So you have to take and look at that. Like Notre Dame's losses this year. Well, at the time, they lost to a team that went to the national title game and a team that was really, really good for the entire year. And that matters when you have such a small sample size. But when you play 30-something games and you lose half of them, that's supposed to matter, isn't it? And I get that the competition and all that, but Kev is saying that's meant to get rid of the mid-majors. And I think that sucks, because I don't know. I'm just, this frustrates the shit out of me. Sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
You're right.
Take over.
You're absolutely right there. I mean, it's very, very frustrating. It's an incredibly frustrating system there. And to me, if you're a team where you're on the bubble at the end of the season and you're playing in that power conference team, you have had every opportunity to prove that you belong in that tournament. You have had every opportunity to say, we belong in here. If there's still question marks about you, you should be looking at the teams that haven't had those opportunities and be like, okay, maybe in some hypothetical world, if Auburn played Belmont, Auburn would be favored. But Belmont didn't have those same opportunities. Belmont didn't get a chance to go play teams like Kentucky, like Florida, like Arkansas. They didn't get those opportunities that a team like Auburn did. And I know Belmont was not really ever being compared to Auburn. It was more Miami of Ohio, which that's a completely different story where, they had a very weak schedule, but they won all their games.
Which is hard to do no matter what your schedule looks like.
Auburn, I guarantee you, Auburn, if they were in the MAC, would not have gone undefeated in the MAC. That team that I watched a decent amount of Auburn, especially late in the year when they were on the bubble. And I'm like, they're a fine basketball team, but they wouldn't go undefeated in the MAC. They wouldn't go undefeated in the Missouri Valley Conference. They couldn't go on the road to a place like Belmont or a place like even Carver. I don't think that team would necessarily, maybe they could beat, some of those teams but I don't think they would beat all of them. I get very frustrated the same way you do, where it's like, if you got two teams that you're comparing and saying, which one of these teams should we be given the opportunity to make the tournament? One of them's had every opportunity to prove they belong. The other one hasn't been given those same opportunities. Why aren't we giving the opportunity to the team that hasn't been given the chance to prove it?
Right. And like Brad loves it when I get pissed, because I rarely ever get like this upset. But what drives me insane is when we get toward the end of the year and we're looking at a resume, and then I hear, well, if they win a game in the conference tournament, that'll cement it. Well, what the hell have they been playing the rest of the season for and the rest of the conference championship for? Like, how do we determine it's one game that is going to get a team that's just barely there when there are a lot of good teams in these lower conferences that I understand that your general public doesn't know, but at some point, the cream of the crop is going to rise, and the teams that people recognize, the blue bloods, are going to make it in the later rounds, and people are going to watch. The whole point of the tournament is it's a flawed system. It's not the best way to try to champion, but it is supposed to be the most fun way. And if all we're doing is putting middle of the pack power conference teams in there, then at that point it's just a glorified conference tournament, and it's lost the entirety of its mystique, in my opinion.
Well, and one last thing, just bringing it back to I was talking about that graphic earlier, where all the where all the players started their college careers. There are 5 players that started their college career in the Valley that are starting on the Sweet 16 teams. You got Jacoby Gillespie, you have Frank Mast, you have the guys who started at Drake for Iowa there. You've got these players who started their college career in the Valley, and there's clearly talent in the Valley. When you got guys who can then go on to be starters for Sweet 16 teams, it's not like these mid-major teams are void of talent. It's just that they are not being given the same opportunities.
Yes. And I will put a pin in it. We're done. I'm done. I promise you, Brad, I'm done. I'm going to be calm. Go ahead and
no, I'm good, man. I
get
think
us here to the end. I'm good.
No, I think we've driven the nail home as far as the national landscape goes. We're all going to obviously feel the same way about it, being fans of a mid-major program, and fans of a league that often gets left on the outside looking in, more often than not. So, no, honestly, Aaron, really pumped you joined us, man. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Appreciate the time. I think the OG, I'm getting the finger, so the OG's got something to add here.
Yeah, I want to say one thing, and I know Coach Wardle don't listen to us, but
Multiple.
But
not now.
Hey, I hope it'd be nice if he did, because I got something, kind of positive. But if Coach Wardle sits there and think you fans are just, Bradley fans are, I know he always says, great fans and stuff like that, afterwards, which, I mean, that's coach speak in a sense. But for us fans, 11 years ago, if a player made a mistake, that's all right. Come back, you'll get it next time. That's okay. Just shake it off. Now, Coach Wardle, you have developed such a program, such a team, where we as fans just can't help ourselves.
Some.
Yeah. But you should have caught that ball. You put it up too hard. Learn to kiss the ball off the backboard. Things like that. So I'm just saying.
All things I've heard you say at games.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Coach Wardle, you've made us fans crazy as can be, and we love you for what you've done for the city, for the university. Hope you stay around forever, as far as I'm concerned. Kevin may not like that, but hey, but still, I'm just saying. I mean, you partly developed us into rabid fans that we are, and we look for as much perfection as we can possibly get, game in and game out.
That's what happens when you win. Like Kevin said, you win games, you raise the standard, and then
exactly.
I mean, good. You get the passion, but at the same time, the other end of the sword is you do get the just I guess, like I said, the high standard, and people just will tolerate less poor play.
Yep, meta gets some hands, buddy.
Exactly, and I'm just going to put a pin on what you're saying there. I mean, just think about how many times throughout the season we all got crazy with something that Meta did, or something that AJ did, or something that Bully's not having the best game, or whatever the case may be. We're all getting crazy. The team still finished second in the Valley.
Exactly.
Alex.
So, but anyway, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show here today. I've had a blast with you guys. Love talking Bradley basketball, and anytime you guys need an extra voice on the show, I'm happy to hop in here.
Awesome, Aaron.
Hopefully we can be more consistent, especially in the off season now, just because I think we have a lot of fun. But I will kind of piggyback off what you're saying to get us out of here, Aaron, is that I've enjoyed having this be a space that people feel that they can come to and talk about a team. And yeah, we have the X chat, and there are other avenues for this, but it is nice to come on here and just sort of feel like you're being seen by other people who feel the same way as you do, right? Rabid, and sometimes you feel irrational about the team. But again, when they win and when you are emotionally connected, it's part of the gig. And I think it's fun. And yes, Rick, we give you a lot of guff sometimes, but you've seen more basketball than probably anybody here, and you have stories and you love the team. And being able to be here, share with it, and have other people on here like Aaron and Joey has come on, and we've had so many others, and we want to have others. It's just a great feeling to me. So I have fun doing it. I love doing it for those two guys over there because I think they deserve it. Every one of the fans deserves it. And to me, I'm just happy that we're able to do it. So hopefully we'll be able to come back with some good news next time. But who knows? I do think we should be more consistent, guys, and come on here and just kind of talk Bradley, maybe do some history lessons with the OG, maybe a little bit. Maybe we can do a watching film with the OG kind of thing and, have him break down some film. But either way, Aaron, it has been a lot of fun. For everybody that's out there, as I always say to you, I hope this finds you well and safe. And I'm so happy that you have been with us. And we'll see you next time. This is Braves Talk.